You can't be agile with the project funding model. And most organizations never address that, so they blame the teams. But the real problem in really getting agile to take hold in an entire organization is looking at how the money flows. Funding models kill organizational agility before the teams even start.
Welcome to the Agility in Real Life podcast, Take 5 in Real Life. Now your hosts, Mike Stuedemann, Jeff Lee, and Pat Campbell.
You're right, Jeff. Today we're talking about one of the most ignored and some might say hidden blockers in Agile, which is finance, our friends in finance, because you can't change how teams work without changing how that work is funded. I'm Pat Campbell, one of the partners at Agility IRL, and with me are two of the top partners here besides myself.
We're top five. We're all top five.
Which is why we haven't added any partners.
We have Mike Stuedemann, our other partner, and Jeff, who was our open, Jeff Lee. And so talk to us, Mike, about the core conflict, if you would kick it off.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Pat. First of all, I'm sure we still have listeners after introducing this week's topic of finance, because I know everyone loves to talk about that. But with that said, here's the issue. Projects are temporary. Project Management Institute, the foremost certifying body for project managers, projects are temporarily defined beginning and end. Agile as a philosophy is about the continuous flow of value. So the product, a product-based model really is about product birth all the way through till death. Projects optimize for deadlines, products optimize for values, or for value, pardon me. And so there's a conflict inherently in the structure between project-based funding and product-based funding. And as we've been saying, Jeff, throughout this series of episodes, it's not the fault of the team.
No, absolutely not. And I see this again in most companies that I work with, where especially in where we specialize in the med device space with long-running development efforts, right? Big projects, that they keep their scope in two places. There's an approved scope document that has sign-offs and all this stuff. And then there's this backlog for the teams, which is really just, it's command and control, it's waterfall in disguise instead of like really big waterfalls. It's like a rapids you're going through, right? But it's not true agility, because the end is known at the time that you start, or at least any change to it is deemed as a failure.
Yeah, and I touched on it earlier, but Pat, maybe you can opine on at a little deeper level on what project funding forces. Because really, Jeff, that two sets of scope, one set of scope is being forced by the finance organization saying, look, we need to budget for the next 3 years, give us your scope and let's lock that down so that we have some certainty around that financing piece. So Pat, take our listeners down a level lower. What else does this project funding do?
So it really forces a commitment before you've really learned anything. And your scope gets locked, which means your flexibility really goes out the window. And then teams are judged on delivery, on output, as opposed to outcomes, business objectives. A product aligned flow would talk about business outcomes, not project. Project is what is the deliverable at the end of the project, and then we go to the next deliverable. It's all about output.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of you are hitting on the fact that we're trying to make commitments before we even understand the problem.
Yeah, and it's all done in the name of predictability, right? We think that if we lock in this scope and say this money goes to this scope, then we can predict our end results because we have some ROI forecasts and everything's going to work out just fine.
Well, and let's defend our finance brethren here for a sec. They want predictability, and in the finance world, predictability is rewarded. The street wants predictability. Executive management has to talk to the street wants predictability. The irony, of course, is that thirst for predictability is actually creating more risk. because you're guessing up front.
And to defend them a little bit further, they've been doing it for decades. And so changing how they do it is not going to happen overnight. It's a cultural change. And as we've heard many times, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So so it takes a while to adjust this concept.
Yeah, Pat, you and I worked many years ago at an organization that they were doing agile delivery at the team level really well. They really were, and they were a mix of different contract vendors who were doing the majority of the work. Well, they got to a certain point where they had gotten to the end of the project funding, and they had a vendor team that was going to be there. Like the management had planned on them being around, for indefinitely, many more months. But they had run out of funding. And so they say, hey, vendor team, all you have to go take vacation for 2 weeks. Oh, and by the way, you don't get paid for your vacation, right? I mean, what does this do? What kind of culture does this create? In addition, they didn't get all the vendor team back.
So how does, I mean, it's a really good example, and most people love vacation. Most people don't like unpaid vacations. So let's talk about product funding as we continue the episode. How does product funding change this challenge, gentlemen?
So it flips the model because you're funding teams over long periods of time, over life cycles of products, not projects. And therefore the teams can stay stable as opposed to the situation Jeff just described. They're able to adapt based on the incremental learning gained through the continuous development of the product. And then funding becomes continuous, and the results measured again by the business impact. Is it impacting the business, not which cost center has contributed what, and are they getting out of it what they thought they would? And then that cross cost center measurement of success or failure is just a maze. And so that product funding is the underlying secret there.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to that example from before as well, because when we do project funding, it's not only like this group of people is on a project together for a while. It's Pat is 30% over here and 15% over here and 10% on this project.
Yep.
And not only is that a pain in the butt to log the time, but it doesn't make sense, right? They can just fund the people for the organization, for the product. And instead of like funding all this little discrete approved work separately, they're really funding outcomes for the product as a whole.
Well, and to me, that's the key piece, because I guarantee there's someone listening to this episode saying, but how do we hold teams accountable? You don't just fund outcomes, but you got to evaluate them based upon those outcomes. So as we near the end of this episode, gentlemen, Pat, I'm going to give it to you. Give our listeners some concrete recommendations on what to do here. I don't think your first recommendation is going to be, storm the finance castle and overthrow the organization, but maybe not. But give us some actionable recommendations.
So Mike, it's like we do with everything else in Agile. We start small and increment from there. And so if you can identify a potential product that would support funding for a team, that's a great place to start. And set it up as an experiment with finance and say, suggest that as a potential new approach. And then show them how to measure outcomes, not just the output, and map those outcomes to the funding to determine if the ROI is there or not. And then review that ROI regularly, because it's okay to pivot if it's not the ROI you're looking for. And then that way you're shifting from control more to visibility and engagement with the business. And this really pulls the business in, because just measuring output means nothing to them if it doesn't have a direct impact on the business they're trying to grow.
Yeah, I love that you said visibility, because there's fundamentally, we talk a lot about transparency in Scrum, in Agile, in these processes that are unpredictable by nature. And so we can't control them. But the way we can best control them is to monitor them closely, and we can monitor them closely by seeing what's actually going on. So like Mike said, are we measuring objectives? Are we tracking what's actually happening from an outcome perspective? Are finance people coming to our sprint reviews? Do they have visibility to what's actually happening?
Absolutely. I mean, you gentlemen said it best. You can't scale your way out of a rigid funding model because money defines behaviors, incentives. You want to understand how anyone's behaving, look at the incentives, and a lot of us are reacting based upon how we're funded.
Are you alluding to one of our favorite films, Show Me the Money?
Yes, this will be known as the Jerry Maguire episode
There you go.
of the Take 5 IRL podcast. But seriously, if you fix the funding, everything should get easier.
Yeah, it does. Everything should start flowing, right? Let the money flow.
Absolutely. Jeff, Pat, any final words?
Yeah, if you're trying to do a transformation, most fail before you even get started if you can't, if the funding locks in scope before your learning happens. So try to start there and engage that finance team. You might be surprised. They're not as bad as they are made out to be.
And I will say, if you're thinking about getting started with Agile or you're early in Agile, don't take this as a warning that you can't keep working to improve how you work as a team unless you have this in place, right?
Mhm.
I view the funding as kind of a secondary step. If you're going to unlock organizational agility, you need alignment there. But if you want to just improve how you work as a team, you can absolutely do that before you have the full financial picture in place.
And as always, don't hesitate to reach out if we can be of any assistance. Pat, Jeff, thanks for your comments. Thanks everyone for joining us on this episode of Take 5 IRL.
We'll see you again.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Take 5 IRL podcast. If you like it, please go ahead and share it with someone, as well as like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Also, leave us a comment or a suggestion for a future episode. Again, thanks for listening, and we look forward to you joining us next time on the Take 5 IRL podcast.